a lot of people think the biodiversity crisis is about the loss of species, how many species are going extinct. But the real crisis we face right now is that all of the species that we think are really common are now living on half or less of the habitat they used to. They've experienced, and like their populations cannot, the entire population cannot live on half of its land or in habitat that it used to have. So all these populations of species we don't consider endangered yet are much lower in size than they used to be just 100 or more years ago. And with that population decline, there's losses of genetic diversity. And so if we look at the extinction crisis on the level of the gene, or really the allele, the diversity of genes within an organism in a population, we've obliterated genetic diversity on this planet. It's just absolute annihilation. And genetic diversity is the foundation of adaptation.
That's actually terrifying. I had not thought of it along these lines before.
And so, now you fast forward. So, you go back hundreds of years and you just see colonists and the changing in the world, eroding habitats, drastically reducing population sizes. You get to this century when we've drastically changed the climate, and that's rapidly happening. And just creating, it's amazing that we don't talk about it more because of the pandemic. But just before the pandemic, Australia experienced a mass extinction level catastrophe due to the fires that happened there. And what's astounding to think about is to think how many species in Australia might have actually gone extinct if they hadn't already been in zoos. Because their habitats were obliterated. There was actually a certain type of perch that conservationists were rushing out to get to these lakes to scoop up the last ones they had because the fires, the combination of the fires, and then after the rains came, the fires had produced so much ash that the rain the ash influx into the rivers and the freshwater system was literally causing mass extinctions of freshwater species. Oh, just suffocating them, basically. I mean, it turned entire rivers into mud, just sediment. It's been devastating, and those are the types of things that now species that once had thousands of individuals have just 10 or 20 left. And we've saved species from that brink before, but it is very difficult. It takes decades. And even after decades of recovering species that have experienced such low numbers, their diversity takes much longer to build back up. It's random mutation and selection that builds back up that diversity. So these gene editing technologies are now so necessary in the future. And I think the world's going to start seeing that, and that we need to do it. And it's not necessarily about adding something new into these species. Like, we don't have to take a species and give it a new gene and make it something completely brand new to overcome a disease, when we can actually just do the exact same thing we're doing with de-extinction, reaching into the past and looking at the gene sequences of something from 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago, getting that back into something alive. Think about that for those species that are still alive, that have experienced a crash. Thankfully, with the way scientists were in the 1700s and 1800s, they were going out and they were collecting specimens of everything. Yeah. And so in a museum drawer in Sydney or Perth or Melbourne, there will be specimens in a jar in the drawer of some of those species of fish or some of those species of mammals that have now just literally been virtually wiped out. And we can sequence their DNA, and we can take the few individuals that are alive, breed them back up, and then in cell lines of those animals, we can actually edit back in the diversity that they've lost.